Sometimes the enemy doesn't come from the outside. He steps out of your own past, dressed in a perfectly pressed suit, wearing a smile, and carrying a full arsenal of lies in his pocket. Everything around looks respectable. Clinking glasses, polite conversation, flawless facades. But behind the polished surface hides a game where the stakes aren't just reputation. They're the very core of who you are. One wrong move, and everything built over the years can be erased. All that matters is holding the line to the end. Because the final move in this game won't be the one they were expecting. Hi, glad you're here. But before we jump into the video, don't forget to check the description and subscribe to my friend's channel. He'd love your support. Let's go. Reed Morgan's hands clenched the steering wheel of his Ford F-150 so tightly that the color drained from his knuckles as he turned into an unfamiliar driveway. The house before him, a towering three-story craftsman, stood like a showroom piece against the mountainous skyline of Asheville. It was opulence wrapped in the illusion of tradition. Homes in this area didn't go for less than 8 figures. Then, through the fog of his thoughts, his daughter's voice pierced the silence. "You okay?" Sophie asked gently. Reed glanced over at her. Her dark hair had been freshly braided that morning, not by him, though he'd tried. Yvette from next door had rescued them from his failed attempts. Her deep brown eyes, mirrors of his own, studied him with a concern no child should have to carry. "Yeah, kiddo," he said quietly. "Just thinking about your mom's new place." Sophie tilted her head. "Is that why you're being weird?" He shut off the truck and looked out at the pristine landscaping and picture-perfect hedges. In the 6 months since the divorce, Lara had managed to rewrite her entire life, as though their 15 years together had been swept clean. "We won't have to stay long," Reed murmured, more to himself than to her. Sophie frowned. "But Mom said this party's for me." She always used her own name when she felt uncertain, a habit that hadn't faded. "I know," she added, "but I'm with you most of the time anyway." They climbed out of the truck. Reed immediately felt like an outsider in his nicest pair of jeans and a freshly ironed shirt, surrounded by sleek imported cars and polished luxury vehicles. He already knew this place wasn't for him. Sophie slipped her small hand into his. "Ready?" she asked. Before either of them could knock, the front door opened. Lara stood there like a portrait come to life, blonde hair styled in soft waves, her dress an elegant navy piece that probably cost more than he made in a month. Her smile faltered the second her eyes landed on him. "You're late," she said, leaning down to hug Sophie. "Everyone's inside already, sweetie." "Traffic," Reed replied, though they both knew better. Lara stood and smoothed down the fabric of her dress, brushing away imaginary lint. "Well, come on in. Mom's been asking about you." Reed doubted that Diana Hartman had asked a single thing about him, but he followed them in. The house was gleaming, shiny hardwood floors, designer furniture, everything arranged with a deliberate, catalog-like precision. What struck him most, though, was what wasn't there. In the old house, Lara had insisted on covering the walls with memories, wedding photos, snapshots from beach trips, Sophie's school pictures. Here, the walls were blank. The past had been wiped clean. They moved into a cavernous, open living space where a crowd of well-dressed guests sipped champagne and nibbled on hors d'oeuvres. "Reed." The voice sliced clean through the noise. Diana Hartman approached, martini glass in hand, wearing a tailored pantsuit and enough diamonds to blind someone. "Diana," Reed said coolly, giving her a stiff nod and using the nickname she detested. Her smile tightened. "How kind of you to make an appearance. We were beginning to wonder." "Wouldn't miss it," Reed replied, tone flat. "Lovely home." Diana's gaze swept the room, clearly proud. "Lara's always had an eye for design. This neighborhood suits her far better." The meaning beneath her words was hard to miss. The neighborhood Reed still lived in, the one where he ran his auto shop, didn't make the cut anymore. He didn't make the cut. "Grandma, where's the food?" Sophie's voice chimed in. "Me and Dad are really hungry." Diana's expression thawed slightly. "Of course, darling. Everything's in the dining room." As Sophie wandered off, Diana's polite smile vanished. "You should have changed. This is a formal gathering." "Came straight from work," Reed replied calmly. "Of course you did," Diana said, taking a slow sip of her drink. Still the dedicated mechanic, always too busy for anything refined. No surprise Lara finally came to her senses. Color rose to Reed's neck, but his face remained unreadable. "Got something you're dying to say, Diana?" She widened her eyes in false innocence. "Not at all. Enjoy yourself." She floated away toward a group of women who leaned in the moment she arrived. Seconds later, their laughter bubbled up, not the inclusive kind. Reed made his way toward the dining room, nodding at a few familiar faces. Not one acknowledged him. He was visible, but only just. Present, but unwelcome. At the long dining table, Sophie was deep in conversation with Camille Rivers, Lara's supposed best friend. Camille had always been one of the few who treated him with genuine kindness. "Reed," she said warmly, her smile sincere, "I'm glad you came." "Good to see you too," he answered, meaning it. "How's Jordan?" "Growing like a weed. He's already in 5th grade," she said with a laugh. "Single parenting is no joke, but I guess you know that better than most." Since the divorce, Reed had Sophie 5 days a week while Lara transitioned, a term that seemed to include dating, upscale events, and property shopping far more than parenting. Just then, Camille's eyes flicked over his shoulder, her face shifting. "Careful," she said quietly. "Incoming." Reed turned at the sound of approaching footsteps and saw Lara arriving with a sharply dressed man who looked to be in his early 50s. The man's salt and pepper hair was immaculately styled, and he carried the kind of poised authority that comes with long-standing leadership. "Reed, I see you found the buffet," Lara said with a practiced smile. "Have you met Gavin yet?" "Gavin Knox, our mayor." Gavin. This is Reed, Sophie's father. Her father, not her ex-husband. The distinction was deliberately emphasized. Mayor Knox extended his hand in greeting, nodding with the ease of someone who's shaken thousands. "Nice to meet you, Reed. Lara mentioned your work. Custom motorcycles, isn't it?" Reed shook the man's hand, noting the softness of his skin and the glossy finish of manicured nails. "Yeah, that's right. That's a unique trade," Knox remarked. "I've always admired people who can build things with their hands." Though the words were polite, the underlying tone didn't escape Reed. It was the kind of praise that subtly patronized. "Dad makes the best bikes in the state," Sophie chimed in proudly, her face lit up. "Dad built one for that movie actor, the action guy." "Ramsey," Reed added. "Ryder Ramsey," Sophie confirmed, nodding enthusiastically. Lara's eyebrows lifted ever so slightly, a brief flicker of surprise betraying that she hadn't known that detail. "That is impressive," Mayor Knox said with a smile that didn't quite match the compliment. "Small businesses like yours, they're the backbone of our economy. We should be supporting them, all that good stuff." A hush followed, tense and uncomfortable. Sophie glanced among the adults, confusion furrowing her brow. "Well," Lara said in a bright, practiced tone, "we should get back to mingling. Sophie, honey, there are some folks here who are eager to meet you." Sophie's grip on her plate tightened. "Can Dad come too?" Lara's smile wavered for a moment. "I'm sure your dad would rather grab a drink. The bar's fully stocked." "I'm driving," Reed replied flatly. "Of course," Lara said, her smile now brittle. Always the dependable one. As she and the mayor moved on, Reed saw Knox lean toward Lara and murmur something that drew a familiar melodic laugh from her, a laugh Reed had once believed was genuine. Left behind at the buffet table, Reed stared down at his empty plate. Around him, conversation and laughter blurred into a low, indistinct murmur. He set the plate aside and drifted toward the living room, scanning the crowd for his daughter. And then he heard it. "Why is he even here?" Diana's voice, pitched just loud enough to be overheard. "He's like a grease stain on silk." A burst of laughter followed, and among the voices, Lara's laugh rang out again. Reed turned his head and saw her standing with her mother and 3 other women. They were all watching him, smiling without shame, their amusement poorly concealed. Lara didn't come to his defense. She didn't even look uncomfortable. In that moment, Reed understood with stark clarity. This wasn't just the aftermath of a breakup. This was enemy territory. He scanned the room again and spotted Sophie near the fireplace. Mayor Knox stood beside her, showing her something on his phone. One of his hands rested casually on her shoulder, too casually, in Reed's eyes. He crossed the room with purpose. "Hey, Sophie," he said calmly. "Everything all right, kiddo?" Sophie looked up, her expression easing into visible relief. "Dad." She reached for his hand at once, holding it tightly. "Mr. Morgan," the mayor greeted, standing straighter. "I was just showing Sophie some photos of my lake house on Lake Norman. She and Lara are coming up next month for a weekend visit." Sophie's grip tightened even more. Reed hadn't heard anything about that. "Huh," he said, keeping his tone neutral. "That's news to me, considering our custody terms." The mayor's smile stayed in place, though his eyes sharpened. "I'm sure you and Lara can come to an understanding. She mentioned how accommodating you've been." Before Reed could respond, Sophie tugged gently at his hand. "Dad, I need the bathroom." Reed nodded quickly. "Sure, let's go." He let her lead, but instead of heading toward the guest hall, Sophie turned toward the front of the house. "Sweetheart, I think the bathroom's the other way," Reed said, pointing back. She shook her head, lifting her pale face to his. Her wide eyes were filled with something close to panic. "Dad, we need to leave, right now." Reed crouched so he could look her in the eye. "What's going on? Did someone say something to you?" Sophie glanced around nervously before leaning in. "Not here. Please, can we just go?" He'd never seen her this unsettled. He nodded without delay. "Okay, let's get your sweater." He fetched her jacket from the coat rack and helped her into it. No one tried to stop them. No one even noticed as they slipped quietly out the front door into the cool evening air. Reed felt as though they were invisible, ghosts no one acknowledged, as if their existence had never counted. They made their way silently back to his truck. He opened the passenger door for Sophie, helped her up, fastened her seatbelt with care, then walked around to get behind the wheel. Once they were on the road, he asked, "What happened back there?" Sophie kept her eyes forward. Her hands were folded quietly in her lap. "Not yet," she said softly. Almost 15 minutes later, the two of them sat on a sun-bleached bench, eating frozen custard. Sophie had gone with chocolate in a cone. Reed had opted for a plain vanilla cup. She finally broke the silence. "Mom's been acting weird lately," she said, catching a drip before it reached her fingers. Reed didn't rush her. He gave her the space she needed to continue. "She and Grandma are always whispering. They go quiet the second I show up. And they make me keep the bathroom door open during baths. They check my phone a lot, too." Reed tried to keep his voice neutral. Maybe they're just being overly cautious. But even as he said it, he knew it didn't sound right. Sophie shook her head. "It's more than that. Before the party, I heard them talking in the kitchen." Reed forced himself to appear calm. "What were they saying?" "Mom called you unpredictable. That's the word she used. And Grandma said they needed to be careful." Sophie paused, then said, "They mentioned putting something together. Like a case." "A case?" Reed repeated, keeping his voice steady, even as a sick feeling twisted inside him. She nodded, her expression turning serious. Grandma said they needed proof, something they could show a judge. I think they're trying to make it look like you're dangerous. Her lower lip began to quiver. Mom told Grandma you're going to lose me. A bitter, coppery taste rose in Reed's mouth as anger surged. He set his custard aside, untouched. Sophie, he said gently, keeping his voice as calm as he could. You know that's not true, right? I would never hurt you. I'd never hurt anyone. I know, she said immediately. The certainty in her voice nearly broke him. You're the safest person I know. Reed reached over and wiped a smear of chocolate from her cheek. Thank you for telling me, he said quietly. Are you mad? Not at you, he said quickly. Never at you. They finished their custard in silence, the air between them thick with unspoken fears. As they headed back toward the truck, Sophie reached out and slipped her hand into his without a word. What are we going to do? She asked. Reed helped her back into her seat, then looked her in the eyes. First, he said, we're going to watch that penguin show you keep talking about. His face tightened slightly, though his tone remained soft. And after that, I'm going to make sure no one ever takes you away from me. Once they were both back inside the truck, Reed let the cold rage inside him fully take hold. Lara had always known how to manipulate things. But this wasn't a game anymore. This was open warfare, and she'd brought it to his doorstep. He turned the ignition. A strategy was already beginning to take shape. Watch, record, expose. That night, while a nature documentary played faintly in the background and Sophie lay asleep, Reed carried her gently to her bedroom. Unlike the rest of his modest, sparsely decorated house, her room was vibrant and full of life. She'd picked the pale green paint herself. Shelves were crammed with science books, and a telescope was positioned at the window, aimed at the stars. Above her bed, glowing constellations dotted the ceiling. This room was her sanctuary, and Reed would defend it with everything he had. Back in the living room, he collapsed onto the couch, his head in his hands. The quiet, usually so soothing, now felt oppressive. He picked up his phone and called Miles. His friend answered on the second ring. Morgan, figured you'd still be at that fancy event. We left early, Reed said, voice low. You got a minute? For you? Always. What's going on? I need some advice, off the record. That's the only kind worth giving. Go ahead. If someone were trying to build a legal case against you, what would you do? There was a beat of silence on the line. This about Lara and her mom? Those two? Miles stopped himself short. Why do you think they're up to something? Sophie overheard them. They're telling people I'm unstable, calling me unpredictable. They said they've got stuff they can take to court. Reed's grip on the phone tightened. Lara told Sophie I'm going to lose custody. Miles cursed, his voice laced with fury. That's disgusting, dragging her into this. What should I do? Reed asked. A rare question, one he didn't ask lightly. Start documenting everything, Miles said immediately. Save texts, emails, any communication. If it's legal in your state, record your phone calls, and go over your custody terms. See where they might try to poke holes. He hesitated, then added, and be careful. They're counting on you to mess up. We've been sharing custody. Nothing official, no court order. Then they're definitely aiming for full custody, probably with supervised visits for you if they get their way. A queasy feeling rose in Reed's gut. Why? It didn't matter. They'd find a reason. They always did. His ex certainly had. She'd accused him of being unstable just because he raised his voice now and then, branded him an alcoholic over a few weekend beers. Miles's tone was laced with cynicism. The system's a joke. They'll believe her, no questions asked. Reed's thoughts went to Sophie, her worried face flickering in his mind. She was just a kid, too young to be dragged into adult messes. I'm not sitting back this time, he finally said, not letting them corner me again. What's your move? I make the first one, Reed replied, rising and pacing. This time it's my playbook. I want cameras, a complete setup. I need evidence, everything documented. You need someone who can do that discreetly? Miles asked. I've got a guy. Keeps quiet. No prying. Book him, Reed said. Tomorrow, if possible. You got it. Miles paused, his tone darkening. You realize what this means, right? If they're pulling this kind of stunt, they're not thinking straight. Desperate people screw up. That's what I'm banking on, Reed said. He hung up and headed to his compact office space. The desk was immaculately arranged. Years in the military had hardwired that habit. He grabbed a new notebook and began writing. Details from the party, Sophie's confession, his suspicions, timelines, observations. No speculation, no feelings, just facts. This would be the bedrock of his counterattack. As he wrote, a memory surfaced. Laura's blank look when he mentioned a custom job for Ryder Ramsey. She hadn't shown interest in his career for a long time, had stopped seeing him as anything impressive, had made him feel small. The signs had been there, but Reed had been too loyal, too blind to walk away. He closed the notebook and glanced at the clock. A little after midnight. He should have gone to bed, but his thoughts wouldn't settle. Instead, he brewed a fresh pot of coffee and immersed himself in the intricacies of North Carolina's family law. When dawn finally broke and Sophie wandered into the kitchen in her dinosaur pajamas, Reed had a game plan and a prepaid phone hidden in a toolbox out in the garage. "Morning, sunshine," he said, pushing a plate of scrambled eggs toward her. "Sleep all right?" She nodded, studying him. "Did you?" He offered a weary smile. "Enough." "Are you going to be okay, Dad?" The concern in her voice was too heavy for someone her age. Reed knelt so he could look her in the eyes. "Sophie, listen to me. Everything's going to work out. Better than that, it's going to be good. But I need a favor." "What kind of favor?" "I need you to just be a kid. Go to school, read your books, check out bugs under that microscope you love. Let me handle the adult stuff." She narrowed her eyes, measuring his words. "You mean it?" "Every word," he said, his voice steady. He gently tapped her nose, and a tiny smile crept onto her face. "And I've never failed at a job yet." The installer was tightening the last surveillance cam above the back door when he came down from the ladder. "That's number 6, he said, wiping his hands on a rag. 3 outside, 3 inside, all hooked up to this." He showed a tablet displaying camera feeds in a grid. Motion detection, night vision, audio, cloud storage. Reed scanned the footage, each entrance and key room covered. "What about backup power?" 48 hours, easy, even if the grid crashes." The technician, Mason according to his name tag, adjusted a few settings. "All data's encrypted. No one's cracking into this." Once the equipment was packed and the installer had left, Reed stood in the living room, caught between relief and unease. It felt strange, surreal, wiring up his home like it was a crime scene. But Laura and Diana had forced his hand. His phone buzzed with a message from Miles. "Everything in place?" "It's done. Heading to the shop. On my way." Roughly 20 minutes later, Reed was back at his workstation at Morgan Custom Cycles, elbows deep in the guts of a vintage Harley. The bell above the door jingled as Miles came in, a manila envelope in hand. "Got the intel," he said, laying the folder on the bench. Reed wiped the grease from his hands and opened it. Inside was a detailed file on Mayor Gavin Knox, bank records, business dealings, political affiliations. "Where the hell did you dig all this up?" he asked, flipping through the pages. Miles just gave a calm, unreadable shrug. "My cousin works for a private investigations firm in Charlotte. He owed me one," Miles said. Reed raised an eyebrow but kept his questions to himself. The folder he held was detailed, lists of properties, donors, and voting records. "Go to page 4, Miles instructed, tapping the file for emphasis. Reed flipped through the pages until he reached the one indicated, and froze. Typed neatly in bold black font was a record of ethics complaints filed against Gavin over the last 10 years. While most had been dismissed, 2 had resulted in financial settlements. Sexual harassment, Reed read aloud, tension lacing his voice. Both were secretaries at his law firm, before he became mayor, Miles confirmed. Those payouts came with NDAs, I'm guessing. Reed's jaw tightened. And this guy's spending time with my daughter. There's more, Miles added. Look at page 6. Reed turned another page and found rows of financial documents. What exactly am I looking at here? Campaign expenses. Check those withdrawals. Personal purchases disguised as political spending. According to my cousin, it's enough to trigger an ethics probe. Reed scowled. Why hasn't this surfaced until now? Miles leaned back against the bench, relaxed. Small-town dynamics. As long as the roads are smooth and taxes don't spike, folks stay quiet. Reed closed the folder, his mind moving quickly. This is solid, but I need to be smart. Can't have it come off as a hit job. Right, Miles agreed. Think of it as a card you hold, not one you play unless you have to. Reed nodded, slipping the file into his desk drawer. You hear back from your lawyer contact? Thursday's the meeting. Bring everything. Reed turned back to the motorcycle he'd been working on and cranked a bolt harder than necessary. Installed cameras at the house last night. Started logging everything. Got a burner phone, too. Good move, Miles said. What's the next step? Reed picked up his personal phone and launched a voice recording app, setting the phone on the workbench. From now on, every call with Lara gets saved. Then he pulled the burner from his jacket pocket. This is my backup. If something happens to my main line, use this. Miles saved the number. You're thinking 10 moves ahead. Can't afford not to, Reed said, his expression hardening. They've been setting this up for a while. Just then, the bell above the garage door chimed. Yvette Tate stepped inside, noticeably more reserved than usual. Yvette? Reed said, surprised. She rarely visited the shop. Sorry to barge in, she said, walking toward them. Miles texted. Reed turned to Miles, eyebrows raised. We need allies, Miles said simply. Yvette's seen you with Sophie more than just about anyone. Yvette joined them at the workbench. He told me what's going on. Lara's trying to take Sophie? Reed gave a quiet nod. He didn't try to hide how worried he was. Yvette was one of the few he fully trusted. That's total crap, she said firmly. You're one of the best dads I've ever seen, probably in the whole neighborhood, maybe the town. Thanks, Reed said softly. I'm serious, she continued. My boys look up to you. After what they went through with their dad. Her voice faltered for a second, but she recovered. If you need someone to vouch for you, I'm in. I've seen you with Sophie almost daily for 4 years. One more thing, she added. My brother Logan. He's a family lawyer. Miles mentioned him, Reed said. He's damn good. He won my custody case, even when my ex came in with a corporate legal team. Her tone sharpened. If you need a fighter, he's it. When Yvette left, Reed turned to Miles. You've been busy, he said. Miles gave a slight shrug. Told you I had your back. Been through it myself. Lost my kids playing fair while my ex played dirty. Not letting that happen to you. Reed placed a firm hand on his friend's shoulder. No words, just silent thanks. The game's in motion, he said quietly. Now, we wait for their next move. Right on cue, Reed's phone rang. Lara's name lit up the screen. He looked at Miles, then hit record on the voice app. Here we go, he said under his breath. 3 days later, Reed was wrist-deep in an engine rebuild when the landline at the front desk rang. Miles answered. A moment later, he appeared in the doorway, his face grim. Child Protective Services, he said quietly. They're at your house. Reed calmly wiped the grease off his hands, though his mind was already racing. Did they give a reason? Anonymous report. They want to speak with you ASAP. Reed gave a tight nod, grabbed his keys, and headed for the door. Keep things running here, he said as he left. I'll call when I know more, Reed had told him, and the 15-minute drive home had been thick with tension, his hands clenched on the steering wheel, his thoughts spiraling through a series of worst-case possibilities. A complaint had been made. The timing was too deliberate to be coincidence. As he turned into his driveway, a fresh wave of unease hit him. A government-issue sedan was idling just outside. A woman, likely in her early 40s, stood waiting near the front steps with a clipboard tucked under her arm. "Mr. Morgan?" she called out as he stepped out of the car. "Alicia Ross, Child Protective Services, Buncombe County." Reed gave a courteous nod, keeping his expression neutral as he unlocked the front door. "Come on in," he said, stepping aside to let her through. He was relieved he'd taken the time to clean earlier. "Am I right in assuming this is about a report?" he asked once they were settled in the living room, motioning for her to sit. Ross eased herself onto the couch, placing her clipboard across her knees. "Yes, we received an anonymous submission regarding your daughter's safety." "What sort of concerns were raised?" Reed asked, remaining on his feet. His tone was calm but alert. Ross glanced at her notes before responding. The tip mentioned aggressive behavior, emotional volatility, and unpredictable conduct. She paused, then looked him directly in the eyes. "It also claimed your daughter has access to unsecured firearms in the home." Reed's jaw tightened. "I own a single hunting rifle. It's locked in a secure safe. Ammunition is kept separately. I'm a veteran. I don't take gun safety lightly. Would you be willing to show me the setup?" "Of course." He led her down a hallway and opened a closet, revealing a reinforced steel gun safe with an electronic lock. "I'm the only one with the code," he said. Ross jotted something down. "And your daughter's room?" "Right this way. You're welcome to take a look." They entered Sophie's bedroom. The space was clean and organized, though clearly lived in. Books lined the shelves, the bed was made with a few stuffed animals neatly arranged, and her desk was scattered with homework and science projects. Ross scanned the room carefully, making notes as she went. "This is more than sufficient," she murmured. "Very appropriate." Over the next 30 minutes, Reed walked her through their daily routines: school commutes, shared meals, evenings spent on assignments, and weekend family activities. He showed her the calendar in the kitchen, the emergency contact list on the fridge, and the well-stocked first aid kit in the bathroom. "There's one other thing I should mention," he said carefully. "My ex-wife and I are currently transitioning to a formal custody agreement. Up to now, it's been handled informally." Ross's expression shifted ever so slightly. "Is it a contentious situation?" "It's becoming that way," Reed admitted. Just recently, Sophie overheard her mother and grandmother discussing plans to seek full custody. Ross's brow furrowed. "That's unfortunate. Kids shouldn't be exposed to those kinds of conversations." She stood, tucking her clipboard under one arm. "Mr. Morgan, I won't take up any more of your day." Her voice was softer now, more personal. "This particular report doesn't raise any valid red flags. Your home environment is safe, and your daughter's needs are clearly being met." She hesitated before adding, "To be candid, this sounds very much like what we often see in custody-related allegations." Reed gave a slow nod. "That was my sense as well." "We're required to investigate every tip," she said, offering him a business card. "But this one will be classified as unfounded. No further action is necessary, and if another investigator shows up unexpectedly, don't hesitate to contact me directly." Once she had gone, Reed stood still in the living room, a cold, controlled rage beginning to build. He grabbed his phone and called Miles. "It was a plant," he said without preamble. "Someone reported that I'm unstable, careless, and leaving weapons unsecured." Miles cursed. "Lara. Has to be." "The caseworker said it was clearly without merit," Reed muttered. already moving toward his desk to retrieve his notebook. He started to write everything down while it was still fresh. But this is just the opening move. What's next? He paused a beat, then added, I need to speak with Camille. She knows how Lara thinks. Later that day, Reed met Camille at a small cafe on the edge of downtown Asheville. When he arrived, she looked up and gave him a tight, weary smile. I appreciate you coming. He took the seat across from her, noting the tension in her shoulders. Long day? You could say that. She scanned the cafe, then leaned forward slightly. I heard CPS came by your place. Reed raised an eyebrow. News travels fast. Lara's been talking, Camille said, bitterness creeping into her voice. She told a few close friends it was just a warning shot. Reed kept his voice measured, but anger simmered beneath the surface. I suspected as much. Did she mention what else she's planning? Camille stared into her coffee. That's why I reached out. Reed, she's trying to provoke you, push you into making a mistake, something she can use against you. Use in what way? He asked quietly. Any way that makes you appear unbalanced. Tense texts, arguments unfolding in public. They were laying traps. She stopped mid-thought. Lara had warned you, step out of line, and she vanishes. Reed absorbed it all in silence. They're baiting me. Exactly. They're pushing you, hoping you'll break. Camille touched his hand briefly, a feather-light reassurance. Don't give them what they want. I appreciate the warning. But Camille wasn't finished. She leaned closer, her voice hushed. There's more. Lara's involved with Mayor Knox. It's not just casual. He's footing the bill, her apartment, the car, the whole setup. Reed gave a slight nod. I suspected as much, but hearing it still stung. Camille kept going. His reach is long. Judges, officers, even people in child services. Lara's banking on that influence. Reed looked at her, noticing how tense her jaw was. Why are you telling me this? Weren't you too close? Something passed through Camille's eyes, a flicker of hurt, maybe resentment. We were, maybe we still are. I don't really know anymore. She sighed, the sound heavy with conflict. But what she's doing now, it crosses a line. Using Sophie as leverage? That's beyond cruel. Reed gave her a solemn look. I'm grateful. Watch your back, Reed. They're not playing. They're out to win. Reed's gaze darkened, his voice calm and firm. So am I. 7 days went by without incident. No surprise visits, no venomous texts from Lara, no desperate calls from Sophie either. Reed wasn't fooled by the quiet. It was the calm before something worse. He used the lull strategically, meeting with Logan, Yvette's brother, for legal insight, gathering testimonies, compiling meticulous logs of every run-in with Lara. By Friday night, Reed found himself alone at the shop. Miles had left hours ago, and Reed was finishing up the day's paperwork. The last of the daylight had vanished, leaving only the pale, sterile glow of the overhead fluorescence. The chime over the door rang, slicing through the stillness. Reed glanced at the clock. 8:17 p.m., well past closing. He started toward the front, hand instinctively brushing the wrench tucked in his back pocket. It was a safe neighborhood, but old habits lingered. Camille stood just inside the doorway, arms folded tightly around herself, despite the mild weather. She looked unlike her usual polished self, hair unkempt, barely a trace of makeup, wearing jeans and a wrinkled blouse. Camille, Reed said, caught off guard. Everything okay? She shook her head sharply, and the motion triggered his concern. Can we talk? Her voice was hoarse, barely above a whisper. Just us, if that's all right. Reed nodded, locked up, and flipped the sign to closed. He led her into the back office. Sit down, he offered. You want water? Coffee? I'm fine. She perched on the edge of the seat like she might bolt any second. I probably shouldn't have come. What's happening? Reed asked. Camille's hands twisted nervously in her lap. I had a blowout with Lara. It got ugly, It was about you and Sophie. Everything. She took a deep breath. She figured out I told you about CPS. How? I don't know. Maybe she just connected the dots. She came at me during lunch, called me a traitor. Camille's voice faltered. 20 years of friendship, gone, because I said maybe dragging a kid into this was too far. I'm sorry, Reed said quietly. Camille shook her head. Don't be. It was bound to happen. Lara only keeps people around if they're useful to her. She looked him in the eye. You've seen that for yourself. She reached into her bag and placed a small flash drive on the table between them. And then there's this. What is it? Reed asked. A recording. From Lara's phone. Camille's face was tight with tension. She left it at my place last weekend. I saw the text coming in, from Diana. They were talking about you, about what they were plotting. I went into the phone, pulled a few files, just in case. Her mouth tightened. I know it was a betrayal. But after everything she's doing to you and Sophie, I don't regret it. What's on the recording? A conversation. Lara and Diana. They were planning to plant something at your garage. Pills in Sophie's backpack. Trying to paint you as an addict. Reed reached for the flash drive, his grip tightening until the color drained from his knuckles. You're absolutely sure? Camille nodded once, firm. No doubt. It's both of them, loud and clear. They were going to do it the next time she brought Sophie over. Slip the pills in, then find them later. A cold dread coursed through Reed's veins. This wasn't just an attack on his character, it was a calculated attempt to tie him to criminal activity. When had this been recorded? 3 days ago. Tears welled up in Camille's eyes. Reed, I'm so sorry. I should have spoken up sooner. I kept hoping Lara would come to her senses, that she'd remember the person she used to be. Reed leaned across the desk and let his fingers lightly graze hers. You're speaking up now, he said. That matters. There's more on the drive, Camille continued. Screenshots of messages, pictures of notes Diana wrote. It's basically a blueprint, methods to deliberately provoke you. They've been laying this out for months, even before you two split. Reed absorbed that in silence, nodding slowly. I believe you. Thank you, Camille. What are you going to do? She asked gently. Protect myself. And Sophie. Will you go to the police? Reed hesitated. Not yet. First, I need legal counsel. I've got to plan the next step carefully. Once Camille left, Reed remained in his office, the flash drive in his pocket feeling heavier by the second. He'd always known Lara could manipulate the truth when it served her. But this level of premeditated malice, was beyond anything he had imagined. He retrieved his phone and dialed Yvette's brother. Logan, it's Reed Morgan. Sorry for the late call, but I need to meet you. First thing tomorrow, if possible. He paused, listening. No, this can't wait. I have evidence. Audio recordings. They're plotting to plant drugs. Sleep never came that night. Reed lay in bed while his thoughts cycled endlessly, flickering like worn-out film reels, recent events mixing with long-forgotten memories. Not just what had happened lately, but all the small signals he'd overlooked throughout the marriage. Signs that now stood out in stark relief. He remembered how it all began. Lara's contagious laughter, the spark in her eyes when she spoke about her goals. Back then, she was a paralegal, ambitious but seemingly grounded. Reed had just launched his motorcycle shop after leaving the military, investing every cent and every ounce of energy into building something of his own. They'd met at a backyard barbecue hosted by a mutual friend. Lara had been fascinated by his stories of servicing armored vehicles in Afghanistan. 6 months later, they were married in a small, understated ceremony, plainer than Lara would have liked, he realized in retrospect. Her mother, Diana, had made veiled critiques about the venue, the food, the limited guest list. Lovely, considering the circumstances. The first year passed without major issues. But once Lara became pregnant with Sophie, things gradually began to shift. It started subtly. Remarks about how cramped their home felt, questions about whether Reed had considered expanding the business, gentle nudges suggesting he seek out a more stable career. "There's no long-term future in fixing motorcycles," she had murmured one evening, her hand resting on her belly. "Not when we're bringing a child into this world." Reed had disagreed. His shop was gaining traction, pulling in steady income. But Lara saw it as beneath her aspirations, something small and unimpressive compared to the life she envisioned. After Sophie arrived, the pressure intensified. Lara left her job, insisting that they needed to present a certain image as new parents. She started spending more time with Diana, spending more money on clothes, house makeovers, and networking with people she believed could improve her social standing. Reed worked longer hours to support it all, missing dinners, skipping events, always trying to keep up. She called it neglect. He called it responsibility. By the time Sophie turned 7, the relationship had eroded into little more than a logistical arrangement. Lara had her perfectly curated social life. Reed had his garage. Their conversations were reduced to managing drop-offs and scheduling calendars. Everything fell apart when Reed secured a prestigious commission, building a custom bike for Ryder Ramsey. It was the kind of opportunity that could put his shop on the map. But instead of showing pride or excitement, Lara asked, "And what difference does that make? Will you still just be a mechanic, except now with a famous client?" The separation followed not long after. While Lara was away for the weekend with Diana, Reed packed her things and moved them into an apartment he'd rented. When she returned, he handed her the keys and said simply, "We need some distance." In hindsight, he recognized that as the moment the real battle began. Lara hadn't expected to be the one left behind. In her mind, she was meant to outgrow him, move on to someone more suitable. Reed taking the initiative wounded her pride, and Lara didn't take slights to her ego lightly. Now, half a year later, she was living in a house Reed couldn't afford, driving a luxury vehicle he never could have bought, dating a man with clout, and slowly, deliberately attempting to take away the one thing that still mattered most to him: Sophie. Reed rose silently and walked into his small home office. He clicked on the desk lamp, opened his laptop, and inserted the flash drive Camille had handed him. A series of files popped up: audio files, images, and documents. He selected the first audio clip. Lara's voice filled the room. "We need to apply more pressure. CPS didn't work." "These things take time," Diana responded. "We're not slapping together something flimsy. We're building a case. Gavin says the longer Reed holds custody, the harder it'll be to reverse." "He's right," Lara replied. "But we need to be calculated. Tactical." A pause stretched out before Lara's voice came through again. "What about the pills? Could we aim for next week when Sophie's visiting?" "That could actually work," Diana replied. Sophie's backpack moved back and forth between households. If something suspicious turned up inside, no one would look too closely. "Should it be Reed's apartment or the store?" Lara asked. "The store," Diana answered without delay. It was the smarter choice. More people coming and going, more chances for someone to notice, and Reed stored dangerous tools there. That environment would support their version of events. "So how do we play it?" Lara asked. "We pretend to find them, but not immediately. Let them sit there for a day or two. Then you call me, say Sophie might have left her inhaler. You go check, and that's when you discover them." Reed hit pause. His stomach twisted. They were calculated. Cold. And worst of all, they were exploiting Sophie without her knowledge, slipping things into her bag, involving her in a scheme she didn't understand. Sickened, Reed began scanning through another file, text threads between Lara and Diana, screenshots of handwritten notes with headings like Reed's triggers and custody strategy. The whole thing was damning, a disturbing insight into the mind of a woman he had once believed in. He shut the laptop and leaned back, heavy with a sense of betrayal that somehow clarified everything. The ambiguity was gone. No more space for compromise, no room left for misinterpretation. Only a sharp line dividing truth from lies, right from wrong. And he knew which side he would fight for. Not just for Sophie, for justice. Reed sat alone in his truck, parked outside the courthouse, fists tight around the steering wheel, thoughts racing. On the passenger seat lay a folder of legal documents, a temporary restraining order stamped and worded in stark legal terms, accusations of stalking, claims of threats, warnings of immediate danger. All of it invented. According to Lara's filing, Reed had been following her over the past week, tracking her movements, lingering outside restaurants, circling her neighborhood, and even confronting her in a grocery store parking lot. None of it was true. Still, the judge had issued a temporary order and set a formal hearing for 3 days later. A knock on the window startled him. Logan stood outside, briefcase in hand. Reed hit the unlock button, and Logan climbed into the passenger seat. "Sorry for the backseat legal conference," Reed said. "Figured we should talk before we head in." Logan nodded. "Smart move. I've reviewed everything. It's absolute garbage, but garbage that can do real damage." "She's saying I stalked her," Reed said quietly, voice tense. "That I threatened her." "I know," Logan replied evenly. "More importantly, we can prove it didn't happen." He opened the briefcase and took out a folder. "Your company phone has GPS tracking, miles sent over the logs. We've got a detailed record of your vehicle's location over the past 2 weeks." He paged through printed maps and time-stamped coordinates. "You were nowhere near Lara's house, that restaurant, or the grocery store on any of the dates she mentioned." Relief surged through Reed. "So we've got that on our side." "We've got more than that," Logan said, his gaze sharp. "She went too far, gave specific times and places, and we can show you weren't even close." Inside the courthouse, a clerk pointed them toward courtroom 3, where emergency restraining orders were typically addressed. Reed recognized the judge, Whitman, an older man with a no-nonsense reputation and a firm stance against courtroom dramatics. Lara was already seated with her attorney, a sleek professional in a designer suit. Lara herself was dressed modestly, hair neatly pulled back, makeup minimal. She looked every bit the composed, concerned mother. She didn't look at Reed when he and Logan took their seats across the aisle. Following the formal introductions, Lara's lawyer launched into her presentation, describing Reed as a possessive, unstable ex-husband spiraling out of control since the divorce. Reed kept his face unreadable, though inside he was stunned by the performance. Each lie was delivered calmly, each fabricated detail wrapped in a tone of quiet concern. When it was their turn, Logan rose and addressed the court with cool precision. "Your Honor, we deny every allegation, and we have hard evidence to disprove them." He stepped forward, holding the folder. "Mr. Morgan drives a work vehicle equipped with GPS. These logs trace his exact location during the times in question." He handed the documents to the judge and opposing counsel. On April 15th, the date Ms. Morgan claims she was followed to Westridge Bistro, Mr. Morgan was at a supply warehouse 30 miles away. He then returned to his shop and remained there the rest of the day. Judge Whitman reviewed the documents without revealing any reaction. "Similarly," Logan went on April 17th, the day Ms. Morgan alleges multiple drive-bys near her residence, the data shows Mr. Morgan drove from his home to his daughter's school, then to his workplace, then back home. He never entered her neighborhood." Lara leaned toward her lawyer, whispering quickly. The attorney kept her composure, though a flicker of concern passed over her face. "But most significantly," Logan added, his tone steady, "on April 20th, the day of the alleged grocery store confrontation, Mr. Morgan was working at his shop from open to close. We have security footage confirming his presence throughout the entire day. There's no way he could have been at Carter's Grocery at 2:30 p.m. as claimed." Judge Whitman lowered the documents and looked at Lara's attorney. "Counselor," he said evenly, "how would you like to respond?" The attorney cleared her throat before speaking up. Your Honor, my client stands by everything she said. It's entirely plausible that the GPS failed, or that some technical glitch occurred on each of the listed dates. Judge Whitman interjected, his voice edged with doubt. And what explanation do you offer for the security footage? We contend that it warrants a closer examination, Your Honor, the lawyer replied confidently. The judge gave a curt nod. I'm sure you do, but as it stands, I don't see sufficient credible proof to justify extending the temporary order. He shifted his attention toward Reed. Mr. Morgan, the order is lifted. You may resume your usual routine. Relief swept through Reed's body, but Logan wasn't about to let it end there. Your Honor, we are asking the court to impose sanctions on Miss Morgan for filing a false report, Logan said. The evidence overwhelmingly shows the claims were fabricated. Judge Whitman paused, then looked squarely at Lara. Miss Morgan, the accusations you've made are extremely serious. If the court concludes that you deliberately made false statements, there will be repercussions. For the first time during the hearing, Lara's composure wavered. I wasn't making anything up, she said. I saw him. I felt afraid. The evidence paints a different picture, the judge responded calmly. I'll consider the sanctions request. In the meantime, he leaned forward, locking eyes with her. Take this as a formal warning. Do not return to this court with accusations lacking verifiable evidence. We do not tolerate deception here. With a sharp rap of the gavel, he concluded the session. Court is adjourned. As people began collecting their files and preparing to leave, Reed's gaze found Lara's across the room. Her expression was a mix of shock and fury. She hadn't expected Reed to arrive this prepared, nor had she foreseen such an aggressive response. Outside the courtroom, Logan gave Reed a congratulatory pat on the shoulder. That went better than expected. Whitman doesn't miss a thing, Reed said. So what's our next move? Now we push forward, Logan answered. The restraining order was their last gambit, a way to paint you as dangerous and block access to Sophie. His tone grew more serious, though there was a trace of satisfaction on his face. But it backfired completely. It's time we file for full custody. Do we have enough to justify that? Reed asked. Absolutely. We'll cite parental alienation, filing false reports, and attempting to undermine your bond with your daughter, Logan replied, ticking each point off on his fingers. And let's not forget Camille's flash drive, the recordings of their attempt to plant drugs. This is a solid case, Reed. As they walked through the courthouse lobby, Reed noticed Mayor Knox loitering near the entrance, pretending to scroll through his phone. When their eyes met, the mayor stared back briefly, then turned on his heel and briskly walked away. Well, that's curious, Logan murmured. Bit of a coincidence, huh? Reed said. The mayor just happens to be here today. He's backing Lara, both financially and politically. Then he's chosen the wrong side, Logan said flatly. 2 days later, Reed sat across from Logan in the attorney's office, going over the newly drafted custody petition. The file was comprehensive. It documented the false restraining order, the CPS report, Camille's flash drive with recorded evidence of collusion, and character statements from neighbors and teachers. This is a strong package, Logan said, leaning back in his chair. We're asking for sole legal and physical custody, supervised visitation only, until Lara completes a psych evaluation. Reed hesitated. Isn't that a bit harsh, even after everything? Not even remotely, Logan replied, aligning the pages into a tidy stack. Our concern has to be Sophie. Lara tried to turn her against you and involved her in a dangerous legal ruse. The request is more than reasonable. Just then, Reed's phone vibrated with a new message. It was from Camille. Need to talk. Urgent. Meet me at the park near your shop in 20 minutes. I've got to run, Reed said, showing the text to Logan. Camille has something important. 20 minutes later, Reed pulled into the small city park a couple blocks from his storefront. Camille sat on a bench near the duck pond, wearing dark sunglasses despite the cloudy sky. As he approached, he could see the tension in her posture and how her eyes nervously scanned their surroundings. "Camille," he said, sitting beside her. "What is it?" She removed her sunglasses, revealing eyes rimmed with red. "Things are worse than you think," she whispered. From her purse, she produced another flash drive and handed it to him. "Here, keep it hidden. Don't tell anyone you have it." Reed quickly slipped it into his coat pocket. "What's on it?" "More recordings," she said softly. "Conversations between Laura and the mayor. Discussions about what they'll do once they win custody." Her voice dropped to a near whisper. "They're planning to move Reed to Charlotte. Knox has got a position lined up at a law firm there once his term ends in June. They're planning to take Sophie with them." The words hit Reed like a punch to the stomach. Charlotte was well over 100 miles away, far beyond weekend visits, far enough to remove him from Sophie's life. "Can they even do that legally?" he asked. "Not without court approval. But they think they'll get it," Camille said, wringing her hands. The mayor also had influence within Charlotte's family court network. Quiet favors and backdoor arrangements had already been set in motion. "Why are you still doing this for me?" Reed asked, his voice low. "Laura's already left you behind." Camille's expression hardened. "It's not just about her anymore," she said. "There's a child at the center of this. It's about doing what's right." She paused. "And about the person I want to become." A quick breath escaped her. "There's more. Laura has something planned. She's going to hit you with it today." Reed's eyes narrowed. "What kind of plan?" "She's showing up at school pickup," Camille said. "She'll bring people. She wants an audience. Her goal is to provoke you in front of witnesses." He glanced at his watch. Only 45 minutes until school let out. "I've got to go," he said, already pushing back from the table. "Logan should be there too." Camille caught him by the sleeve. "Reed, please, be smart. After the restraining order failed, she's desperate. She needs a win." "I'll stay in control," he promised her. Reed drove straight to Logan's office, filled him in during a brisk conversation, and convinced the attorney to come with him. On the way to the school, Reed called Miles. "I need a favor," he said as soon as Miles picked up. "Come to Sophie's school. Make sure your phone's charged." "I'm already on my way," Miles replied without hesitation. "What's happening?" "She's trying to manufacture a scene," Reed said. "I need eyes and evidence." Reed and Logan pulled into the school's visitor lot with 15 minutes to spare. They chose a spot that offered a clear view of the front doors and the designated pickup zone. "If she walks up to you," Logan advised, "say as little as possible. Keep your tone neutral. Don't let her bait you. She'll be looking for anything to use." Reed scanned the area. Parents had begun to gather, and cars idled along the curb. "There," he said, pointing. "That's her." Laura stood by the entrance, casually dressed in high-end athleisure wear, chatting breezily with a pair of other mothers. She looked entirely at ease, like her presence on Reed's pickup day was routine. Moments later, Miles arrived and parked beside them. He crossed the lot to join Reed and Logan. "She's by the main doors," Reed said again. "She never shows up when it's my turn. This is calculated." As the school bell rang, the crowd began shifting toward the pickup area. Laura spotted them immediately and moved in their direction. "Reed!" she called, projecting her voice across the open courtyard. "We need to talk about Sophie." Reed came to a stop, maintaining his distance. Several parents nearby turned to watch. "This isn't the time or place, Laura," he said evenly. "She's supposed to come with me today," Laura declared, still walking toward him, her expression composed to look like motherly concern. "She came back last weekend crying. She said you yelled at her." The accusation hit like a slap, so sudden and bold that Reed nearly reacted. But Logan's warning was fresh in his mind. "That's not true," Reed replied evenly, "and you know it." Laura took another step forward, lowering her voice slightly. but not so much that nearby ears wouldn't catch it. "Don't call our daughter a liar just because you can't control your temper." "That's enough," Logan said, stepping between them with calm authority. "Logan Tate, I'm Mr. Morgan's counsel. This isn't the appropriate forum for private family discussions." Lara blinked, caught off guard by the presence of Reed's lawyer, but quickly regained her composure. "I'm worried about my daughter," she said, firm but not loud. "That's not exactly private." "Actually it is," Logan replied coolly. "And as per your custody agreement, today is Mr. Morgan's day. You have no legal reason to be here, and your presence is creating a disturbance." By now, Miles had his phone out, recording openly. Several parents nearby were watching, some trying to be discreet, others more brazen in their curiosity. Lara's gaze snapped toward Miles. "Are you filming me?" "This is public property," Miles said quietly. "You have no reasonable expectation of privacy here." "This is harassment," Lara snapped. Her voice rose. "You're all attacking me just because I questioned whether Reed should be alone with our daughter." At that moment, the school doors opened and students spilled out. Reed spotted Sophie almost instantly, her backpack hugged close to her chest, her dark braids swinging with each step. The moment she saw both her parents, she stopped. Confusion spread across her face. "Sophie?" Lara called gently, stepping forward. "Come here, honey." Reed felt a wave of frustration but kept it buried. He exchanged a glance with Logan, who stepped forward decisively. "Miss Morgan," Logan said firmly, "if you try to take Sophie from her father during his court-ordered time, that constitutes custodial interference, a criminal act in this state." Lara hesitated. Her eyes flicked from Logan to Miles's camera, then to the surrounding parents still watching. The plan was slipping away. Then, in a flash, Sophie broke into a run. Darting past her mother and straight into Reed's arms, he crouched to meet her, voice soft. "Hey, sweetheart, ready to go home?" She nodded, wide-eyed and uncertain. "Why was Mom here?" she asked. "Things clearly aren't going her way today. That much is obvious. Something's gone wrong." Reed stood up straighter, keeping a steady hand on Sophie's shoulder. "We're heading out now," he said. "Say goodbye to your mom," he told her. Lara stepped forward, her face flushing with fury. "This isn't over, Reed." "It is for today," he replied calmly. "If there's more to deal with, it'll be handled through our attorneys." He guided Sophie toward his truck, flanked closely by Miles and Logan, both moving with measured, deliberate steps. Behind them, Lara stood alone in the courtyard, her anger simmering beneath the surface as her plan began to collapse. Inside the truck, Sophie fastened her seatbelt without a word, a troubled look on her face. Reed turned the key, and the engine started. "You okay, sweetheart?" he asked gently. She nodded slightly, then paused and shook her head. "Why did Mom say those things? I never told her you yelled at me." Reed felt a tight ache in his chest at her confusion. "Sometimes grown-ups get confused about what's true and what isn't," he said. "Is that why Mr. Logan and Uncle Miles came too?" she asked. He nodded. "Exactly. They were there to help make sure the truth didn't get lost." Sophie thought that over, then nodded again, this time with resolve. "Good. I don't like it when people mess up what's true." The courtroom was more crowded than Reed had expected. Custody cases didn't usually draw this kind of audience, but word had gotten out. This was the case involving the mayor's partner. Reed sat at the petitioner's table beside Logan, sitting upright, calm and composed. Across from them, Lara sat next to her attorney, wearing a conservative blue dress meant to convey dignity and modesty. Directly behind her, Diana sat stiffly, her silver hair meticulously styled, her lips pressed in a disapproving line. The mayor was noticeably absent, a strategic decision, Logan had advised, to prevent any perception of political bias. When Judge Carr entered the room, Reed felt a cautious flicker of hope. Her reputation, was one of precision and fairness. If anyone could see through Lara's performance, it was Judge Carr. Once everyone was seated, she opened the case file for review. We are convened today to consider a motion filed by Mr. Reed Morgan requesting a change to the current custody arrangement regarding his daughter, Sophie Morgan, she stated. Mr. Morgan is seeking full legal and physical custody with limited supervised visitation for the child's mother, Ms. Lara Morgan. She looked up. Let's begin with opening statements. Logan stood, adjusting his jacket. Your Honor, this matter concerns a father committed to shielding his daughter from manipulative and damaging actions by her mother and grandmother, he said. In recent months, Ms. Morgan and her mother have deliberately attempted to sever the connection between Mr. Morgan and his child, fabricating incidents to portray him as unfit and unstable. He proceeded to outline the CPS involvement, the unfounded restraining order, the disruption at Sophie's school, and the audio recordings provided by Camille. But most disturbing, Your Honor, Logan said with gravity, is the deliberate plan to plant prescription pills in Sophie's backpack while she was visiting her father's workplace, so they could later be discovered and used to falsely incriminate him. Judge Carr's expression remained composed, but her eyes grew more alert. Those are serious claims, Counselor. They are, Your Honor, and we have corroborating documentation for each allegation. Logan pointed toward the evidence already submitted. This isn't a case of miscommunication or the emotional aftermath of divorce, he continued. It's a premeditated effort to remove a loving father from his daughter's life through deception. When Lara's attorney rose to speak, she offered a contrasting perspective. Your Honor, while Mr. Morgan paints himself as the aggrieved party, the truth is more complex. Both sides have contributed to the tension in this co-parenting arrangement. My client requested a restraining order because she genuinely felt unsafe. The fact that the order was denied doesn't invalidate her fear, Judge Carr interjected. According to the record, Judge Whitman not only dismissed the order, but warned your client against filing a potentially false claim. Is that correct? The attorney hesitated. Yes, Your Honor. But if I may... Go on. As the proceedings continued, Logan laid out the evidence with deliberate clarity. Camille was the first to take the stand. Ms. Rivers, how long have you known Ms. Morgan? Logan asked. About 20 years, Camille replied. We became friends in high school. Would you describe your relationship as close? Yes, we were good friends, until recently. What changed? Camille gave Lara a brief look before facing Logan again. I found out she was planning to falsify evidence in order to win full custody of Sophie. What happened when you confronted her? She cut me off, Camille said plainly. How did you learn about this plan? Camille explained that she had discovered voice memos on Lara's phone, recordings of conversations between Lara and her mother, and text messages plotting to bait Reed into a public confrontation. During cross-examination, Lara's lawyer attempted to discredit Camille. Isn't it true you've always been envious of Ms. Morgan, of her status, her friends? Camille stayed composed. No, that's not true. I've questioned many of her choices, especially the ones that impacted her daughter. But violating her privacy by reading her messages? That crosses a line no supportive friend should cross. Still, when I came across a message referencing some kind of scheme involving Reed, I couldn't ignore it. I won't claim I'm proud of invading her privacy, but what I found couldn't be overlooked. Yvette was called next to the stand. She described her observations as a longtime neighbor to Reed and Sophie. He's the most committed father I've ever seen, she stated confidently. He's patient, attentive, and always prioritizes Sophie's well-being. She also mentioned that even her own children had noticed the contrast, often asking why their father wasn't more like Reed. Following her, Miles testified about the school incident and the planted drugs that were used in an attempt to incriminate Reed. 2 of Sophie's teachers submitted statements praising her progress while in Reed's custody. Her science club advisor explained how consistently Reed showed interest in her academic development. When Reed took the witness stand, Logan led him through a series of questions about his parenting style, his connection to Sophie, and his perspective on Laura's allegations. Mr. Morgan, in your view, what has motivated Ms. Morgan to take these actions against you? Logan asked. Reed took a beat before responding. Laura doesn't see Sophie as her own person. She treats her like an extension of herself. When I ended the relationship, Laura perceived it as abandonment. Now, I believe she's using Sophie to retaliate. But there's more. Laura and her mother seem to have a predefined vision for Sophie's future, one that excludes me and the values I've instilled in her: curiosity, honesty, and a strong work ethic. During cross-examination, Laura's attorney tried to provoke a reaction. Isn't it true, Mr. Morgan, that you resent Ms. Morgan's current partner? That your feelings about her relationship with Mayor Knox are rooted in jealousy? Reed's voice remained steady. No. What concerns me is the mayor's potential influence over the outcome of this case. Laura's personal life isn't my business. When Laura gave her testimony, it was a blend of selective truths and emotional appeal. I've always been Sophie's primary caregiver, she said, her voice faltering just enough. Reed was always at the shop, always busy. He's a good provider, but I'm the one who understands Sophie's routines, her needs. When the conversation turned to the recordings Ms. Rivers had presented, Laura's composed exterior began to shift. Defensive one moment, wounded the next. Those recordings are taken out of context, she said. My mother and I were just venting, talking through what-ifs about Reed. It was never serious. Judge Carr interrupted. Ms. Morgan, I've heard the recordings. They don't come across as idle speculation. They reference specific times, plans, and methods. We were upset. People say things they don't mean, Laura insisted. Logan stepped forward with the transcript in hand. Ms. Morgan, on April 12th you said, quote, "We need to give the judge something solid, something that makes him look unstable." He paused. Your mother replied, "The pill plan is our best bet. All we need is the right moment." Would you still describe that as hypothetical? Laura's cheeks flushed. You're twisting our words. I'm quoting directly from your own conversation, Logan replied. He turned the page. Then, on April 15th, you told your mother, once we have full custody, Gavin's connections in Charlotte will make the move easy. Were you intending to relocate Sophie without discussing it with Mr. Morgan? We were only considering our options, she said. But you never spoke with Mr. Morgan, Sophie's father, about those options, correct? Logan pressed. No, because no final decision had been made, she responded. He continued to highlight contradictions, peeling back her claims of innocent venting to reveal a calculated plan. By the time he finished, the mask of calm she had maintained was starting to slip, exposing glimpses of tightly controlled anger. Diana followed, delivering her testimony with less subtlety but just as much distortion. Where Laura leaned on a facade of hurt, Diana projected open hostility toward Reed, the court, and anyone who questioned her daughter's narrative. We absolutely talked about ways to protect Sophie, she said coldly. That garage of his attracts all sorts, bikers, shady characters. No child should be around that. Did you personally see anything inappropriate while Sophie was at Mr. Morgan's shop? Logan asked. I didn't need to see it to know it was happening, Diana replied. So that's a no? Logan clarified calmly. Diana narrowed her eyes. You're twisting my words. I'm asking for concrete evidence, Mrs. Hartman, Logan said simply. Do you have any? In closing statements, Laura's attorney leaned heavily on her maternal role, emphasizing the natural bond between mother and child and portraying the conflict as a regrettable miscommunication. Logan's closing was succinct but powerful. Your Honor, this is a case about truth versus manipulation. Mr. Morgan has produced indisputable proof that Ms. Morgan has tried to exclude him from his daughter's life through deceitful means. He gestured toward Reed. "This is a father who has acted with honor. He's documented every visit, provided a stable environment, and supported his daughter's growth. He has never spoken ill of Sophie's mother, nor has he used his child as a weapon. All he had ever done was fight to remain a part of his daughter's world, even as powerful forces tried again and again to shut him out." Judge Carr had called for a recess to weigh the evidence before issuing her decision. When court reconvened an hour later, her demeanor was grave as she prepared to read the ruling. "In the custody case concerning the minor child Sophie Morgan," she said, her tone composed, "this court has carefully reviewed all testimony and documentation. The matters at hand have raised serious and unsettling concerns." She turned her attention to Laura. "Ms. Morgan, the court has found compelling and deeply troubling proof that you made deliberate attempts to sever Mr. Morgan's bond with his daughter. Though there are ethical concerns about how Ms. Rivers obtained the recordings, they are admissible, and what they reveal is a deliberate attempt to fabricate accusations against Mr. Morgan." Laura parted her lips to object, but her attorney gently touched her arm, signaling her to remain still. "Furthermore," Judge Carr continued, "your previous attempt to obtain a fraudulent restraining order, as determined in Judge Whitman's earlier ruling, demonstrates a disturbing willingness to misuse the legal system for personal gain. This court refuses to condone such actions," she stated firmly, now addressing Reed directly. "Mr. Morgan, your detailed records and your consistent efforts to provide a stable and caring environment for your daughter are admirable. Numerous witnesses have testified to your devoted and ongoing presence in Sophie's life." With that, Judge Carr closed the folder in front of her with finality. "Based on the totality of the evidence," she declared, "this court grants Mr. Morgan full legal and physical custody of Sophie Morgan, effective immediately." A soft gasp escaped Laura, while behind her, Diana's face tightened into a cold, unforgiving mask. "Ms. Morgan will retain visitation rights," the judge continued, "though for the time being, those visits will be supervised until she completes a parenting course and undergoes a psychological assessment. The court will revisit the matter in 90 days. With a decisive crack of the gavel, the hearing came to an end. As the courtroom began to empty, a whirlwind of emotions surged through Reed: relief, affirmation, and an aching sadness that it had come to this point. Just then, Sophie burst through the courtroom doors, having waited outside with her court-appointed advocate. She rushed straight to him, flinging her arms around his leg in a fierce embrace. "Daddy!" she cried, her face lit up with joy as she gazed up at him. "Miss Page said you won. Does that mean I get to stay with you now?" Reed knelt down to meet her eyes. "Yes, sweetheart," he said softly. "You'll be living with me now. But you'll still see your mom, too." Across the room, Lara watched silently, her expression unreadable. Diana leaned in and whispered something into her ear. "She's broken," Diana murmured, just loud enough for Reed to hear. Still holding Sophie's hand, Reed stood up and met Diana's stare with calm resolve. "No," he said evenly, "I protected her. From you." 3 weeks after the custody verdict, Reed was seated behind the shop counter, sifting through a stack of invoices. Business had noticeably picked up, whether from the renewed attention tied to the Ryder-Ramsey Commission or from the recent custody case making waves locally, he couldn't say for certain. Miles came in holding 2 coffees. "Morning, boss. Catch the paper yet?" He tossed the latest edition of the Asheville Citizen-Times onto the counter. The headline was hard to miss. Ethics investigation launched. Mayor Knox faces scrutiny. Reed skimmed the article, which detailed a widening scandal involving alleged campaign finance violations, ethical breaches, and suspicious dealings with companies competing for city contracts. Lara and the custody matter weren't mentioned, but several of the financial discrepancies mirrored contents from a confidential report Miles's cousin had quietly compiled a few weeks back. "Interesting timing," Reed murmured, sliding the paper back. Miles shrugged. Anonymous tipster, supposedly. Someone with insider access to campaign records. Not our concern, Reed said. But both men understood that wasn't entirely true. That evening, Reed and Sophie were preparing dinner in the kitchen, while the local news played at low volume on the small TV by the counter. Mayor Knox appeared on screen, reading from a statement in which he denied all allegations, but confirmed he would be stepping back temporarily while the inquiry proceeded. "That's Mom's friend, right?" Sophie asked, scattering cheese over a bowl of greens. "Yes," Reed said carefully. "They've been spending time together." Sophie considered that as she carefully arranged slices of tomato. "He looked kind of sad on TV," she noted. "Sometimes people make decisions, and then stuff happens that they didn't expect, like when I didn't study spelling and got an A-. Reed laughed lightly. "Something like that," he agreed. "Only bigger." "Is that why Mom's so quiet when I visit?" she asked. "Because of what happened to him?" Reed set the spatula aside and turned fully toward her. "Your mom's going through some changes right now," he said gently. "But she still loves you very much. The supervised visits won't last forever." Sophie nodded thoughtfully, with a maturity beyond her years. "I know. Miss Page told me everything." Then she looked up at him earnestly. "Dad, are you still mad at Mom?" The question caught him off guard. He paused before answering, choosing his words with care. "I'm upset about some of the choices she made," he said honestly. "But my focus is on moving ahead, making sure you're safe and happy." Sophie regarded him quietly. "But you don't forgive her," she said in a small voice. It wasn't a question. Reed met his daughter's steady gaze and didn't look away. "There are things in this world that aren't easily forgotten, Sophie," he said softly. "But that's mine to bear, not yours. You love your mother, and that's exactly how it should be." The aftermath of what had happened lingered in the days that followed. Mayor Knox issued a formal statement announcing he was stepping down with immediate effect. Though the press barely mentioned Lara, Reed heard through less public channels that her standing in the elite circles she had carefully cultivated was collapsing. With Knox's money no longer behind her, the polished life she'd constructed began to erode. She listed her elegant craftsman-style home for sale, and less than a month later, she was back working as a paralegal. One clear Saturday morning in late spring, sunlight filtering through the trees, Reed loaded the final piece of camping gear into his truck bed. Beside him, Sophie was checking off items with a quiet focus. Tent, sleeping bags, cooler, first aid, flashlights, matches, waterproof container, she recited. Then she glanced up. "Did you remember the marshmallows?" "Extra pack," Reed said, gesturing to a paper bag nestled beside the cooler. "Plus chocolate and graham crackers." Sophie's face lit up. "Exactly right." At that moment, the low hum of a motorcycle drew their attention. Miles pulled in on his custom Triumph, the engine softening to a purr before going silent. "Ready for the wild?" he asked, tugging off his helmet. "Almost," Sophie answered with calm precision. "We're finishing the final checklist." Reed had just turned the key in the ignition when a familiar car appeared at the end of the street. Lara's sedan approached slowly. A brief pulse of unease passed through him. He wasn't sure if another confrontation was coming. But Lara only slowed to a gentle crawl, lowered her window, and gave a small wave to Sophie, who was already buckled in the back seat. Her appearance had changed. Her hair shorter, her clothes simpler, her demeanor subdued. Sophie waved back with enthusiasm. "She's coming to my science fair Tuesday," Sophie said, as Lara's car drove past. "Miss Page said she could." Reed gave a small nod as he pulled away from the curb. "That's good. She should be there for things like that." They left the city behind, Asheville giving way to quieter towns, and then to the winding roads that snaked through Pisgah National Forest. Miles followed close behind, the sun catching on his bike's chrome as they climbed higher into the mountains. They stopped at a lookout point to stretch. The valley unfolded beneath them in a wide expanse of greens and soft blues. Sophie sat between Reed and Miles on a fallen log, quietly sipping water and taking in the view. After a quiet moment, she spoke. "Dad?" Reed turned to her. "Yeah? You didn't lose." He blinked, caught off guard. "Didn't lose what?" "The fight, with Mom and Grandma Diana." Her voice was calm, certain. Her eyes carried a clarity that felt far too old for her age. "They tried to take me," she said, "but you didn't let them." Reed wrapped an arm around her, emotion tightening his throat. "No," he whispered. "I didn't." Sophie gave a small nod, satisfied, and returned her gaze to the sky, where a hawk drifted in wide, slow circles above the trees. Later that afternoon, as they broke down the camp and got ready to head home, Reed felt something unfamiliar but welcome settle in his chest. Peace. A lasting, grounded kind of peace. The fight was over. Not just the custody battle, but the deeper war. For truth, for dignity, for the right to raise Sophie without manipulation or control. He hadn't found it in himself to forgive Laura. Some wounds didn't close. He didn't wish her pain, and he had no desire to retaliate. But he wasn't going to rewrite what had happened. She had shown him who she truly was, and he believed her. As they made their way back toward Asheville, Sophie asleep in the back seat and Miles following behind, Reed glanced in the rearview mirror and watched the mountains recede. He knew the road ahead would still have its share of obstacles, learning to co-parent with Laura, helping Sophie adjust, pursuing his career while parenting alone. But for the first time, none of it felt insurmountable. He had made it through the storm, not by surrendering, not by bending, but by holding to what he knew was right. Reed Morgan, quiet by nature, steady in his choices, fiercely loyal, and not someone who took betrayal lightly. To him, betrayal was a line drawn in battle, and he fought accordingly. But more than any of that, he was Sophie's father, a father who would never let himself be defeated, and he never looked back. Our story has come to an end. What do you think about this story? Share your thoughts in the comments, and if you enjoyed the way I tell stories, head over to my channel and check out my other videos. May the force be with you. See you soon, my friend.